Hey everyone, I'm Ryan McDonald. This is To The Point Sports Report. The college football season is here, and I'm joined by Michael and Marcus. How you guys doing?
Doing good, guys.
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. The college football season is upon us. College football starts this week. It's back. It is time for some football. I want to start the season off by talking about some of the top matchups and doing some game previews. This is the best opening weekend in college football history, the most ranked matchups, and a lot of other really good games. We're going to start just straight out of the chute. LSU, number 5, traveling up north to a neutral site, if you want to call it a neutral site, playing in Green Bay at Lambeau Field against Wisconsin. Michael, what are your thoughts on this game?
My initial thoughts are that the best thing about this game is going to be the fact that it's at Lambeau Field, because I don't think Wisconsin has much of a chance. So at least the scene itself for the players and the fans is going to be fun. I don't have too many notes on this. Leonard Fournette, obviously a huge Heisman favorite for LSU. I expect him to have a big day. They're currently favored by 10. I actually think that's a little light. I think they're going to win by at least 2 touchdowns. In my opinion, I just don't think Wisconsin's that strong, but maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised.
You know, with this game, I think because it's at the beginning of the season, LSU's not going to have any trouble. Now, if we were getting further into November, snowing up in Wisconsin, then I think LSU would struggle. But since it's at the beginning of the season, I think Wisconsin's going to be slow rolling. Like you said, Fournette is going to just come out firing. I don't see LSU having any troubles down the stretch. Might be a little rough to begin with, first game jitters for everyone. But I see LSU coming out on top by at least 10.
We all understand what's going on here, right? An SEC team is traveling week 1. We're getting an SEC team away from home or a neutral game down south to travel up north. There's a lot of good questions here that have to be answered or have been answered that we still don't know by the teams. Quarterbacks are going to be somewhat of a question mark for both teams. If it's a ground game, we give LSU the edge. We all understand that. If it's a ground game, it's probably going to be a low-scoring game. Wisconsin's coming off the worst rushing season in 2 decades, and I think they're going to struggle up front against LSU. They have a new quarterback, a fifth-year senior, Bart Houston, named after Bart Starr, a Green Bay Packer, and his first start is going to be at Lambeau Field. I find that it's perfect little storyline there, but I don't think they're going to come out with the win. LSU, I think, is too tough, too big, will pound the ball, and will just come out on top in this game. LSU by 2 touchdowns. Okay, all 3 of us straight across the board believing LSU wins by double digits. Moving back down south to Auburn against Clemson. Number 2 Clemson, unranked Auburn. Marcus, how about you start us off here?
Yeah, Clemson, they came off of a great season. They had a fairly unfortunate loss to Alabama last year. I don't think Auburn is as strong as they have been in the past, and I don't think they're as strong as Alabama was last year. I think Clemson has a very, very good shot at having a very stellar game opening up against the SEC team. Then again, Auburn could, have some magic and close out, but I still got to give it to Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, the game is at the Plains, at Auburn. There's a lot of strange things that happen there. It is the first game of the season, so as Marcus mentioned earlier, you do expect there to be some first game jitters. I'm going to call this the beginning of the end of the Gus Malzahn era, starting with this game, because if Clemson blows out Auburn, it could very well be the end for him and could be his final season. I think as long as Clemson gets off to a hot start, maybe score a couple touchdowns in the first quarter at the very least, I really think that they're going to put it on Auburn and put it on pretty heavily. Clemson's currently favored by 7.5. I think that's a very tricky line because I could very easily see Clemson winning by only a touchdown as long as Auburn hangs around, but I could also see a major blowout. So I'm a little bit conflicted on the line, but ultimately I do believe Clemson just has more firepower and they will beat Auburn.
former Clemson defensive coordinator, who was their defensive coordinator when they lost to West Virginia in the 2011 Orange Bowl, 70-33, is Auburn's defensive coordinator. So it's a little bit of a rematch for some of those guys. Yeah, Deshaun Watson, coming back. You've got Wayne Gallman, the running back, and as your running back, and you have possible first round pick, Mike Williams at receiver. Auburn was 7-6 last year. Solve some of that quarterback discrepancy. Sophomore Sean White will be the quarterback, but I believe they have a lack of depth at wide receiver and running back. They did get Cam Martin, a Baylor transfer who has immediate playing ability. What Auburn does have going for them is a strong defense. And as we've already mentioned, the former DC who lost 70-33. It's hard to talk about and evaluate a guy based on one game. I mean, he did get him to the Orange Bowl and just had a bad game. Auburn holds the series lead here, 34-13-2. The last game was in 2012, and Auburn won 26-19. I think, as you said, Gus Malzahn better have something up his sleeve, otherwise this could be the beginning of the end. Moving on to another SEC team, number 16 UCLA traveling to Texas A&M. Michael, what is your analysis here?
I really believe that UCLA, this could be a coming out party for them and what the potential of their season could be. Currently, Texas A&M is favored by 3. Josh Rosen, UCLA's quarterback, the chosen Rosen, as they like to say. I think this is going to be a statement game by UCLA. I know that Auburn in the past has come out, and this is a little bit of an upset in my opinion because it's at A&M and they're favored by 3. But, I'm going to put a little faith in UCLA, and I'm going to say they're going to go on the road and win in a very tough environment, given, despite Texas A&M showing some very strong performances in the first game the last few seasons.
If I recall correctly, I did put UCLA in my Final Four. I do think that they have the best opportunity to win the Pac-12 this year. Stanford will be rough, but I got to give the conference and the game to UCLA. Their young quarterback, he's going to have things figured out, and I think he's going to come out firing. He was one of the better freshman quarterbacks last year, and I think he'll have it all under control. And again, I give it to UCLA.
UCLA coming in, as we've all now said, all three of us, Josh Rosen will be the advantage in this game against Trevor Knight, an Oklahoma transfer, will be playing for A&M. UCLA has a young offensive line, but I think they're going to have a freshman standout wide receiver, Theo Howard. Another person to watch out for would be Texas A&M's Myles Garrett. As I look at this game across the board, it's if UCLA can stay healthy in this game, they've had injury problems in a couple of their games over the past few years. If UCLA can stay healthy, I don't think there's the reason why they shouldn't be able to win this game. Moving over to a neutral site game, ACC versus SEC. We've got Georgia, North Carolina, and Atlanta. Marcus?
I haven't been too impressed with Georgia the last few years. I always see them creep into the top 25 beginning of the year, throughout the year, even in the end of the year. I haven't been a big fan of them. Again, I'm not a fan of the SEC in general, but Georgia, I just haven't seen a ton from them lately. North Carolina, they had a few off years, if you will, over in the ACC, but I believe that they are on the rise. They were extremely close to winning the ACC last year. I think what they've got going on over there is good. I just don't know if they can handle Georgia in their size. This one's kind of a toss-up for me. Based on what I've seen the last couple years, I lean a little more towards North Carolina.
Yeah, I agree with Marcus. I think this is a very difficult game to pick. Georgia is coming in ranked 18th, North Carolina 22. Georgia is only a 2.5-point favorite, so in college football, that's as close to a pick 'em as you're going to get. Kirby Smart coming in as a new head coach for Georgia, he's going to be very fortunate to have a running back by the name of Nick Chubb, and they're going to feed him until he burps. I think he's going to have a big day going against another kind of SEC storyline. You've got Gene Chizik, who's the defensive coordinator from North Carolina. So it's going to be a very interesting chess match. I think it's going to be a very tight game early on, but I do think Georgia breaks away eventually in the fourth quarter. Keep in mind as well, this game is being played in Atlanta, which is, I want to say, an hour and a half away from Athens. So, the red and black are going to show up, and I believe Georgia will win, but agree with Marcus. I think this will be a very tight game.
Georgia's coming in with a new quarterback, probably. Freshman Jacob Eason has worked extensively with the first team for most of August or half of August. Fifth-year senior Grayson Lambert is still in the running, but junior quarterback, redshirt junior quarterback Bryce Ramsey, I guess, isn't. So there is something there. I've heard a lot of good things about Eason. As you mentioned, Nick Chubb, and I liked what you said there. Feed him till he burps. That's a little different. And Georgia's coming in with new coach, Kirby Smart.
Young D, but pass defense
Was good. And now they got a new quarterback as well at North Carolina. I think that might make them one-dimensional. North Carolina defense got better last year. They're still nowhere near where they need to be. I believe it was ranked in the 90s last year. We know that North Carolina will be able to score on offense, but the question is, are they going to be able to stop anyone on defense? And when it comes to a running team with Nick Chubb and a new quarterback who looked to be pretty good, but they're not going to put him out there to make too many big plays, big decisions, kind of just ease him into it. I don't see Georgia not winning this game. That being said, it's a tough matchup, as I believe Marcus said. This could go either way, but I'm gonna take Georgia here, and I'm gonna take Georgia by 10 points.
Whoa.
Moving on to another big matchup is Notre Dame and Texas. This game is being played at Texas this year. Marcus, how about you start us off?
I believe Charlie Strong, head coach of Texas, was on your guys' hot seat last week. I do agree with that. They didn't have the greatest year last year, and correct me if I'm wrong, they beat Oklahoma last year, correct?
They did.
Texas did beat Oklahoma last year,
which I found shocking based on how well Oklahoma was playing.
Yeah.
So I believe that they can put things together and beat a very good Notre Dame. At the same time, Notre Dame, I think they'll have this. It might be a tougher game than they are hoping, might be a tougher game than Texas is expecting or anyone else watching, but I still give it to Notre Dame, probably by anywhere between 7 to 13 points.
Yeah, I've got Notre Dame in my Final Four, even though I don't really enjoy rooting for them. That's a separate issue. But I would love to see, and I really am pulling for Charlie Strong, so my rooting interests are a little bit divided here. I think it'd be a fantastic win for the Texas program if they beat Notre Dame at home, which is what Texas really has going for them. Something interesting about Notre Dame is, if they say that you've got two quarterbacks, you don't really have one. Well, Notre Dame has two fantastic quarterbacks in Malik Zaire and Deshaun Kaiser. It'll be very interesting to see how they swap those quarterbacks in and out. From what I hear, they are going to go to a two-quarterback system. I think that's going to be very difficult to install on the road. I'm sure these guys have been in the system at Notre Dame for a little while, so they're comfortable with it. I ultimately believe that Notre Dame is probably a year ahead. And what I mean by that is if this game was, maybe a year from now, I'd give the edge to Texas. But I think Notre Dame is a very polished product, and I think they're going to go down there and win. They are favored by 3.5 points. I find that to be very, very close. As with any of these Week 1 games, it'll be very interesting to see what these final scores are. I'd be shocked if Notre Dame only beat Texas by, at least 4 points. I expect them to win by 10. But Vegas tends to know things that we don't, so it'll be interesting to see how the game plays out.
Texas coming off back-to-back losing seasons. They've had good recruiting, but they're still too young. Quarterbacks Tyrone Swoops and a freshman Shane Buechele, who had a great great spring game, and there's a lot of big hype for him by the fans. They're kind of drooling over this, what they think they have there. As you mentioned, Notre Dame is going to go with the two quarterback system with Kaiser and Zaire. Interesting to note, back when Tom Brady was at Michigan, they kind of did the same thing there with Drew Henson, and they played one in the first, one in the second, and then he would go with whoever had the hot hand. And at some point, that system just exploded in his face. Brady had to come in, and he took over and brought them back. And I don't believe they won that game. It was a close. He brought them really close to winning that game, 20-something point deficit. But it's an issue they may have. Not enough has changed. Notre Dame won 38-3 last year, and I don't think enough has changed. Notre Dame wins this by 2 scores at least, 14 points, if not a lot more. Continuing on, we've got 3 games left. Next, we got USC playing a neutral site game in Dallas against Alabama.
Yeah, this game is being played at Cowboy Stadium. It's going to be a big fanfare event, but similar to the game that I believe with LSU traveling to Lambeau, the game is only going to be really as good as the venue that it's played in, and that's going to be it. I mean, it'll be a spectacular scene at Cowboy Stadium, but to be honest, I don't think USC has much of a shot. I think they have talent to compete. I don't necessarily believe that they have coaching and depth to compete. Alabama, just a stat that I saw the other day, Nick Saban in Week 1 games against ranked opponents is undefeated at Alabama. I don't know if he's undefeated in his entire career against ranked opponents Week 1, but I'll just say this. I think Alabama is going to be extremely prepared to play. Alabama is favored by 11.5 points. I think that's about right. I could see it being, a 10 to 14 point win. And ultimately, I believe Alabama will win by a couple of touchdowns. I think they'll want to put on a show early on and really prove to people that they deserve the number 1 ranking, because there still are quite a few question marks with Alabama.
I'm happy to see Alabama, returning champions, number 1 team from the SEC, playing a difficult team in their first game, and a difficult team outside of their conference in general. Y'all have heard my opinion on the SEC before. I feel like they kind of weaken their schedule too much with FCS teams late in the season and weak non-conference opponents typically. So I was excited to see this matchup in Week 1. USC, they've kind of been on a slump for a while, but at the same time, it's USC and you never know what's going to happen. However, if you look at their historic matchups, Alabama has 5 wins versus USC's 2. The last time they played was in 1985, so it's been a while. However, Alabama's, they're on a high. They've had great seasons the last few years. USC's on a low, not so great seasons. That could mean that USC is going to come out firing, hoping to be able to prove themselves early on against the former champion. If they do that, USC should have a great season, but it's hard to say that they'll beat Alabama. So I'll give this one to Alabama. I think it'll be a tight first half. Third quarter, Alabama will start to drift away, and I don't think USC will be able to keep up with them at all in the fourth, and Alabama's going to win by at least 2 touchdowns.
This is a 3+ loss USC team. USC hasn't lost an opener since 1997 against Florida State. This game for USC, the D-line is key. Alabama quarterback race has opened up. It is Cooper Bateman against Blake Barnett. O.J. Howard, their tight end, is back. We all remember O.J. Howard with the long touchdown last year against Clemson. I don't see how Alabama doesn't win this game. They're too used to games in this scenario. They've got too many returning players, and USC will hang with them for a while, but down the stretch, USC won't be tough enough. Alabama's going to be too big, too strong, too fast, and Alabama wins this by 2 scores. it's not going to be, it won't even be close when you go back and watch the game. Kind of like Alabama against Wisconsin wasn't close last year. I feel it's going to be similar, that when you look at the final score, you go, hey, maybe that was closer than we thought it was, but it really wasn't. A late score by USC or something, and Alabama wins this game and moves on. We've got 2 games left to go into. Oklahoma, number 3, playing 15 Houston at a neutral site venue in Houston. Quote marks on that neutral site. That's 3 games that are neutral sites, which really aren't neutral sites, but I guess we understand the nature of the beast. I'll start us off here. This is maybe the best quarterback matchup of the season. It's Baker Mayfield versus Greg Ward Jr. Houston has to get turnovers to win this game, and they're going to have to sack Baker Mayfield. Mayfield was sacked 39 times last year, so it's not undoable. It is possible, but I believe that Oklahoma's also going to come in knowing that they have to protect Baker Mayfield better, and part of that's probably also that Mayfield's trying to make a play in the backfield and extend plays. Houston led the turnovers last year with 35, but their 3 deep secondary guys are all gone, and because of that, I think Mayfield is going to be able to pick on this defense in the secondary, which will open up the run game, and Oklahoma will win this by at least 10 points.
Yeah, 10 points, I think, might be a good starting place. They're favored by 11.5. I think that's a little too high. With the way that Houston played Florida State last year in the Peach Bowl, I think that Houston is going to be able to carry that over. They've got a lot riding on their shoulders right now. They are ranked as they're the highest ranked non-Power 5 conference team, and they got a very good preseason ranking. The next closest, I believe, was Boise State, around 30th. But like you said, it's going to be a great quarterback matchup. The last time these 2 teams played each other was back in 2004 when Oklahoma won by 50. I don't think it's going to be that big of a blowout. I know it's not going to be that big of a blowout. I do believe that Oklahoma will win. I think 10 points is a high pick, but I could also see that happening. Now, if Houston wins, that is going to open the door for them to be in the college football playoff as the first non-Power 5 conference team. And that would be shaking things up pretty bad. That will leave out at least 2 Power 5 conference teams, Power 5 conferences in the Final Four. And if Notre Dame sneaks their way in, that leaves out 3. So I think this is one of the most critical games, other than USC, Alabama, for the opening week and maybe even for the first half of the season.
Yeah, I agree. So last year, Oklahoma finished the season losing to Clemson in the Orange Bowl. This game, excuse me, is essentially at home for Houston. I really believe, I've been kind of going with brand name picks, a lot of favored teams in my selections today, a lot of ranked wins. This is the game that I think is, believe it or not, I actually think it's one of the hardest ones to pick. I think Houston has a real shot in this game. I do think that the 11.5 is a little bit too high. I expect Houston to cover whatever Oklahoma is favored by. Baker Mayfield is an absolutely electric quarterback, and as you mentioned, if Houston has that many holes on their defense that they're replacing, he may wreak havoc on them passing. But I really believe that Houston can hang tough with Oklahoma. Surprisingly, I don't really believe that, even if Houston wins this game, I don't think Oklahoma is out of it as far as the playoff picture is concerned. But, it will be a very interesting rest of the season. Ultimately, I think Oklahoma wins, but I think this is going to be a really tight game, and it may end up being the most entertaining game of the weekend.
Very well could be. Houston is kind of coming into this game as the Boise State was a few years ago. Boise State going into Virginia Tech, going up against Oregon, going against Georgia. Nobody ever gave them credit for it. We've seen what Houston can do, but I think this is now what they have to prove in a second year and kind of get that following. And it's great for Houston because they're starting up with a big game, and they do have some other opponents later on their schedule. I believe Louisville. And Cincinnati, but this is their marquee game. This is what they've been getting ready for all off season, and kind of all of us experts out here, no one's really given Houston this great, giving them the shot. I mean, that's the 11 points. I will say going into this, Houston has 72% of their offense back, 44% of their defense, making a 58% returning of starters, while Oklahoma has 72% on offense back, 66 on defense, making an even 70% back. And I think that 12% difference is gonna show. Oklahoma comes into this game knowing that they're gonna have to have a strong running game, and then they're gonna have to pick on that secondary and secure and hold on to the football. If they can do that, Oklahoma will win this game, and we'll be looking forward in 2 weeks when Oklahoma plays Ohio State. The last game we've got here is Ole Miss, number 11, against Florida State, number 4. A lot of people love this matchup, and for good reason. We got Chad Kelly. We've got Florida State with Dalvin Cook. There's a lot of really electric players, some good coaches, and it's going to make for a fun finish to the Labor Day weekend kickoff of college football. Michael, we're going to start with you here, and let's have you give us a quick rundown.
Ole Miss versus FSU, the two highest ranked teams playing each other this weekend. Actually, I think they play on Monday. Chad Kelly's returning at Ole Miss. Florida State, I believe, has a new quarterback, and you guys may correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yep, DeAndre Francois will be their quarterback.
I actually think that's the difference in the game, to be honest, is experience at the quarterback position in a game that I believe will be decided based on turnovers. I think Ole Miss will have less of them, and I do expect Ole Miss to win this game. It's hard for me to even analyze this game because this is going to be smash mouth football at its finest, really, between these two teams. And I shouldn't say I expect Ole Miss to win, but ultimately I just think that they will. I don't really have much of a rhyme or reason. Florida State is favored by 4.5 points. I do think that's a little bit high, obviously, given that I'm picking Ole Miss to win, but I don't know. This may also be the statement game for Florida State to say, hey guys, not so fast, Clemson. We're going to duke it out for the ACC title and a spot in the playoff. So this is a very highly anticipated game, and again, I think Ole Miss ultimately wins it, but it's a coin flip for me, really.
I think Florida State's a good ACC team. I think they will be good in the ACC. I also think Ole Miss is a good SEC team. And the way that they've been playing the last couple of seasons, I believe they've beaten Alabama the last 2 seasons. That's impressive, seeing as how Alabama has been the only repeat team in the playoffs since the playoffs started, and they won last year. So I think that says a lot for Ole Miss, especially returning their quarterback, who was a pretty year before that. I think Ole Miss handles this pretty easily. I don't want to say it's guaranteed, like Michael said, but I don't see Florida State winning. And if they do win, it'll be less than 4 points, and it'll come down to last minute. But I give this one to Ole Miss, not by a ton, but I think they'll handle Florida State.
This is a big game for Florida State. Coming in, as we said, Dalvin Cook, new quarterback, DeAndre Francois. They have a really good offensive line, and they have a very good defense, and they're going to have to cause turnovers and make him mishandle the ball, have bad reads, and just get some pressure on him to force these turnovers. But as I look at this game, it's hard for me to pick this because I could see either team winning, but the quarterback, as Marcus, as you said, is a big piece in this. DeAndre Francois just has to come in and and manage the game and not try and make big plays. If he can do that, I think Florida State can win this game. For Florida State, this is a game that if they win and go through the rest of their schedule and win, except for Clemson, and they lose to Clemson in a very close game, this is what we look back on and what maybe gets two ACC teams into the Final Four. That being said, I'm going to go with the experience, and I'm going to take Ole Miss in a very close, fun, entertaining game. So as I go back through this, I see that we all pick LSU to beat Wisconsin. We all like Clemson over Auburn. Moving on, all like UCLA to beat A&M on the road. Two of us pick Georgia, one picks North Carolina. All three like Notre Dame over Texas. All three like Alabama over USC. We all like Oklahoma to beat Houston, even though two of us would like to pick Houston. And then we all move on to take Ole Miss over Florida State. The last thing we want to do before we're signing off here is we're going to pick a team on upset alert that we have not mentioned so far, or I believe we're all three going to pick someone who we have not mentioned so far, and we're going to try and do this each week. A team on upset alert. Marcus, how about you start us off?
Yeah, so all the games that we haven't mentioned of teams in the top 25 seem fairly easy to guess who's going to win, predict fairly confidently who's going to win. None of the top 25, other than the ones we already mentioned, I don't see any of them on upset alert. The one that I would like to pick might not seem like a big deal at first, but I pick Eastern Washington over Washington State. Eastern Washington is a FCS team. They've been fairly good recently. Oregon's quarterback last year was a Eastern Washington transfer who played fairly well until he got injured. And then Washington State is barely outside of the top 25 to start this year. They've kind of been kind of the joke of the Pac-12 in the recent past. However, last season they turned things around. I believe they beat Oregon, and they started to make a name for themselves. I believe that they will have a chance to be a top 5 team in the Pac-12 this year. I could see that happening. I think Eastern Washington is a tough opening game just because they are one of the better FCS teams. I do believe that Washington State should win this, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Eastern Washington took this. And if they give them a rough game, Washington State follows it up with Boise State the next week. Another extremely rough game, especially heading to Boise for that one. So they got 2 rough games on non-Power 5 conference teams right in a row. If Washington State can win both of those games, I think they're on the road to a great season. But I think Eastern Washington has a very, very good shot at beating them, and Boise State has a good shot at blowing them out, making their last season leading into this season unfortunate for them.
Interesting prediction. Bold, going out on a limb there. How about you, Michael?
I see a game in Morgantown, West Virginia. West Virginia is currently favored by 10 against Missouri. Now, I don't particularly love Missouri because of my Kansas roots, so it pains me to say this, but I think Missouri's got a real shot at beating West Virginia. And again, as we discussed, I think Danny Holgerson's on the hot seat, and this may be very well the beginning of the end for him. Missouri, I don't have too many stats or too many pieces of information on them. I just know that surprisingly they've been a very solid SEC team over the last few years. And I believe that they have a real shot to beat West Virginia on the road. I know that they'll at least cover the spread of 10 points. It'll be interesting to see if they actually win, but West Virginia, that team's definitely on upset alert for me.
And now I'm going to take about a minute. I'm going to give you guys three games here of teams that are underdogs that I believe could easily win, and we'll start off with South Carolina. Will Muschamp, the coach out there. South Carolina playing Vanderbilt week 1. South Carolina is a 4-point underdog. I could easily see South Carolina winning this game, and it's just a good way to start off the season, having an underdog win in an SEC matchup. Moving on, this is BYU playing a neutral site, once again, a neutral site in air quotes, against Arizona. This game's being played in Glendale at the Fiesta, where the Fiesta Bowl is held. BYU was 1.5-point underdogs. Now, it's not huge. It's almost it's very close in the spread. So it's hard to say that this is too big of an upset. But 1.5, therefore, it is an upset. BYU playing Arizona week 1. Now, I'm gonna take a quick pause here and just go through BYU. BYU is got a brutal schedule. I believe I've done this before, but I'm gonna do it again. BYU, you need to win this game because after this game, you've only got a couple possibilities to win for the first 8 weeks of your season. So you got Arizona week 1, a neutral site. You play home against Utah, and we know that what that game's like. It's always
Vicious.
a big rivalry, and so that's a tough game. Too many emotions. Coming off of that, a week later, you play UCLA at home, and UCLA is a tough team. You played them well last year, but it's going to be tough. After that, you're traveling to another neutral site location, playing in Maryland against West Virginia, and you come home 6 days later, play Toledo. Then you go play at Michigan State. Then you play Mississippi State, and then 6 days later you play Boise State, followed by Cincinnati after a bye week. That is a very, very brutal schedule. There's a chance that they could, win 1 or 2 games in that, but if they find a way to win 6 games, they're going to be very highly ranked because that's a lot of Power 5 opponents and very good Power 5 opponents at that.
Just a quick note, it'll be interesting to see how their first 3 games go. Give us a little preview as to what it would look like if they were in the Pac-12, facing 3 Pac-12 teams right in a row, and then facing a Big 12 team right after that. We all know that they're gunning for a Big 12 spot. Really, they're gunning for a spot in any power conference at this point, but 2 conferences that they're often mentioned to possibly be in are their first 4 games. It'll be interesting to see how that works out for them.
BYU is going to be changing up their offense. They're coming in. They're going to slow the game down. They're going to pound the ball. I think they're going to have some difficulties going through this schedule. That first 8 weeks is just brutal. And BYU, if they find a way to win these games, then yeah, you're right. They will be a top 4 team, but I do not see how they're going to win even 5 of those. My last one is Western Michigan playing at Northwestern. Western Michigan is a 5-point underdog. I'm putting Western Michigan as my upset team. They will beat Northwestern week 1. I doubt it. But I'm saying that Western Michigan will beat Northwestern week 1. That is my upset pick of the week. And so all of that being said, we've gone through the games. We've picked our upsets. The college football season is here. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Enjoy Labor Day weekend. Enjoy 4 days of football. And we'll be back next week doing a recap as well as another preview going into the week. Michael, Marcus, thanks for joining, and enjoy the weekend. Hope your teams win.
Thanks, Ryan.
And hope your teams win.